Good morning, everyone. Welcome to this Local and Community Resilience 2020 webinar entitled Creating Self-Sufficient Crisis-Proof Communities. I hope everybody can hear me. We've got a little bit of a problem and I'm operating off a tablet. My name is Graham Marchbank, your stand-in chair and presenter for the morning place of Peter Bieberbach. He has to be away for a and a board member and volunteer with PASS. Marshal some questions about 11:40 from delegates. But first up, we're going to hear from Daisy Narayanan, talk about placemaking, which will be my slot after Daisy's. Daisy will be talking about active travel. We've then got a piece on green networks, the food, and a case study about the COVID experience from a housing association in Glasgow. So first up, we've got Daisy Narayanan, who is Director of Urbanism at the charity Sustrans, which is charged with making it easier for people to walk and cycle. I first crossed paths with Daisy when she was funded to the City of Edinburgh Council's lead on the city centre transformation project. She's going to refer to that today. Daisy's going to tell us about understanding the role of ACT, and she'll take some questions immediately after she's finished so that she can get away. So over to you, Daisy.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you. And I'll never find it usual, even after all these months, to speak at a conference or an event to screens. And I hope hopefully next year we can all be back in a room together and we can see each other when we talk and discuss and debate some of the ideas. But in the meantime, thank you so much for inviting me. And it's always a pleasure to come and talk about place and placemaking and how active travel fits into the wider placemaking city building agenda. As Graham mentioned, I'm Daisy Narayanan. I'm the Director of Urbanism at Sustrans. I joined Sustrans in 2012. I left the private sector to join a charity that I admire, to work in a field that I feel so passionately about. As Graham mentioned, over the past 18 months, I had been on secondment to the City of Edinburgh Council to lead the City Centre Transformation Programme. Back at Sustrans past few months now, and in a UK-wide role, which is called the Director of Urbanism. And I'd like to touch upon a little bit what urbanism means and how the work that I do fits into the wider livability and urbanism agenda. But before I talk a little bit more about that, I hope you don't mind me telling you a little bit more about myself and my motivation for what I do, and a little bit about the background and where I've come from. So I've had the good fortune to have lived and worked in many cities across the world. I grew up in India and Southeast Asia and Indonesia. And I've lived and worked in Singapore, in America, in London. And I came here in 2004 to do my master's degree into Edinburgh. And I just fell in love with the city. And anyone who's heard me talk, has heard me wax eloquent about how magical I still find the city 15 years later. But my early memories were shaped by my summers that were spent in my ancestral home in Kerala, which is in the south of India, this little village in the south of India. And I still find that place magical. A city girl like me who, I grew up in Bombay, it was 2 months of escape in the summertime to this wonderland. That's my ancestral home up there. It had, all our cousins, there were 20, 30 of us would get packed into this lovely house. And there was a library and woods and mangoes and orchards and river where we learned to swim. And this house is what I credit for my interest in design and architecture. Because it's interesting, where I come from, the word architect, when translated, sits somewhere between carpentry and craftsmanship, which I love. It's a lovely blend of form and function. And Vastu Shastra, which translates as the science of architecture in Sanskrit, laid down the principles for design and layout of houses, of towns, of cities, gardens, roads, waterworks, shops, public areas. It used religious symbolism, so it talked about the planets and the stars and the human body to set the fundamentals of design. And I was in Bombay, cool student architecture. You just rebel against the system, and you look upon all of this with some disdain. It's superstition. But now, with more maturity and a bit more understanding, it's been interesting to look back and what lies beneath that religious symbolism, what lies behind all of those stories and myths that are created to help underpin the design. It's the integration of the built and natural environment with each other and with the human body. It's the design of a place, a city, a town, a house, with a person's health and with a person's well-being at its very heart. And somewhere along the way, we seem to have lost our way. Those pictures at Delhi smog in Delhi, which is, of course, quite an extreme example of what is, as we know, a growing global problem. Air pollution, noise pollution, sedentary lifestyles, mental health and stress, loneliness. There are some quite shocking statistics, as you can see in the slide as well. And it's quite interesting to also think about, the fact that we're living through a climate crisis at the moment, as we know, and the IPCC report warns that the world has already warmed by 1 degree since the middle of the 19th century and could reach 1.5 degrees by 2050 at the current rate of warming. But those least able to adapt will face the greatest impact, and cities across the world are building resilience and adaptation into what they're doing at the moment. So what will it take to transform our towns and cities, our public and personal health? And how do we come together as communities to rebuild that resilience as we face this collective challenge of responding to not just COVID-19, but the climate crisis? More than ever, we have a chance to reshape this new normal, understand what we need from our place, our neighborhoods, our towns, our cities, and how we put people, our communities, right at the heart of our placemaking. And talking about place and people brings me back to my role as Director of Urbanism. A lot of people ask me, what does that mean? What is urbanism? And for me, urbanism is the study of how people in urban areas, such as towns and cities, interact with their built and natural environment. It's an integration of disciplines such as urban planning, which focuses on the physical design and management of urban structures, and urban sociology, which focuses on urban life and urban culture. And in short, this is the work that underpins what we do in Sustrans, putting people and place at its very heart of everything that we do. So, as I mentioned, we have some of, these big challenges that we're facing together. We've got growing inequalities, social isolation, car dominance, got rapid technological disruption as well, and what that means for our future as we look forward. And in Scotland, we have some amazing policies. National government, the National Transport Strategy is starting to look at putting climate crisis and economy and people at its heart. But as we look outside our windows, so many of our local streets feel like this. And over the past year, we've started to identify what livable means. What does that actually mean when we talk about livable places? So for us, and for me, a social connection, a livable place has to have people at its heart. It has to have social connection. It has to have most of what you need, just a short walk away. You hear a lot about 20-minute neighborhoods, 15-minute city in Paris. A place has to have roots and celebrate its unique character and identity. More than ever now, we need to make sure that it's easy for people to move around in a healthy manner, especially as we're living through a health crisis and a pandemic. And we have to make sure that it has clean air and green space for all of us to live and play and thrive in. But how do you make that change? And for me, this is the key. We have to make sure that communities and people who live and work and play in these areas are the ones who come together to shape how the future of a place could be, whether it's a public square or a street or a neighborhood. People who understand the place and people who can bring their own independent perspectives. We're not talking in echo chambers. We no longer can we afford to do that. We have to come together and debate and have that grown-up conversation about what it means, because the scale of change that is required can only be achieved if we can come together and have that positive vision and that national debate and local debate on what we want to see as a positive shared vision for the future. Because meaningful change can happen, and if you don't mind, I'll just have a quick whistle-stop tour of global examples of inspiring positive change. That's Copenhagen a few decades ago, and I'm not going to lie, I think that's pretty cool. But Copenhagen is known for how it's transformed its streets and become bicycle friendly, and people use bicycles as a mode of transport. It's not something that is done just for leisure. You know, it's the easiest way to get around, and the city has made sure that streets are designed in a way that is easy to do and it's most convenient, and that's what people would choose to do. In Copenhagen, in 1962, there's a street called Struket. I'm sure you've heard about how back in the day when they talked about pedestrianizing that street, there was a huge hue and cry, and businesses said that they would die. It would never happen. In a few decades, you can see how the pedestrianization has started to grow, and you can see how, you know, the public squares are starting to bring people together. And 2013, you can see how so much of the city has streets and squares and places have been given over to people. And that's the street that I talked about at the beginning, Struget. It's lively, it's vibrant, it's just full of people, the shops, businesses are thriving. And can you imagine giving these streets back to traffic? Quick examples from New York, and this is an interesting way of, you know, trialing, piloting pocket places, communities come together very quickly, make temporary changes, try and see what it looks like. And again, if you look at the before and after pictures, why would anyone want to go back to a street that is full of traffic and fumes and noise when you can have a place that is thriving and where people can sit and enjoy themselves and be in a place that is welcoming and that makes you feel you want to be there. Similarly, Times Square, the transformation. Can you imagine giving that back to traffic now? You know, it's just absolutely unthinkable. It's really amazing to see what's happening in Paris, an incredible transformation under the leadership of Anne Hidalgo, who's recently been re-elected as mayor, and she's doing some incredible work really quickly as they're starting to recover from the pandemic, as all of us are. In her latest manifesto and in the work that she's doing, she's put very firmly at the heart of it the 15-minute city concept, where all amenities that will be available within a 15-minute walk or cycle, public transport, everything that you need is a short distance away. It's interesting to see Brussels, some changes in Brussels. Again, you know, you can see the changes, just bringing greenery and bringing, making sure that it's a human scale again, and it's not a sea of tarmac. Your surroundings make you feel welcome. Different cities, you know, they respond in different ways. Barcelona has looked at what their urban grid is, and changed it to suit the super blocks model, where you have specific streets that are for traffic, for vehicular traffic, and within those super blocks is given over to active travel for people on foot and bike and for residents. Oslo has a very, very ambitious plan of going traffic-free, car-free in the city center. And it's, you know, I was in Oslo a couple of years ago, and it's really interesting to see how rapidly they're taking away parking spaces and putting greening and, you know, planters, and people can grow things, vegetables. It's just amazing to watch what you can do when you're not designing around the car, you're designing around people and human beings. And you know, we're seeing change happen in Scotland as well. So in Glasgow, it's not, you know, the Avenues project is brilliant, where it's starting to take traffic-filled streets and then taking space away from some of the roads, carriageways, and giving it back to people on foot and bike, putting trees in, creating a real lovely avenue feel. Sauchiehall Street is a really good example of what's happening in terms of the avenues. And it's not just avenues. Glasgow is looking at neighborhoods and how we can transform neighborhoods to make it far more people-friendly, and then connect into the bigger kind of cycling infrastructure that is going in at the same time. And if I may bring it back to Edinburgh, which is my home city, and give you a quick glimpse of my work on, as I mentioned before, the City Centre Transformation Programme. I'd like to give you a quick sense of the scale and ambition of what the city has started to embark on in the next 3 or 4 years, a quick flavor of what Edinburgh streets would look like. But I came to Edinburgh in 2004, and I remember being completely blown away by the built environment and the amazing natural environment around me. But also, over the past few years, looking at how quickly the city is grown and what real challenges face the city as it continues to grow. So right from traffic on George Street, which should be a beautiful capital street, but essentially is turned into a place where people can park their cars, and you see cars, circling around looking for parking. Princess Street, which is a jewel in any city, any European city. You've got a castle to one side, Princess Street Gardens, and Newtown on the other side. And at the moment, it's not pleasant to walk or cycle on. And of course, these pictures at the bottom right, are a thing of the past. I can't even imagine when we can all come together and be in a crowded place anymore. But again, it starts to look at the kind of issues that Edinburgh was starting to grapple with. And the city centre transformation said that it's going to take the streets and give it back to people. And here's a few examples of how it's planning to do so. So that's from, if you know Edinburgh, from the Meadows, as you go into the city centre, there's a street that's got residents and businesses, and it's starting to make that far more people friendly rather than just a sea of tarmac. This junction, which follows on from there, again making it a place where people can come together, and just thrive and just be and enjoy spaces that are not traffic filled. That's George IV Bridge, and you can see how you're taking space away from the carriages, putting benches in, places to sit, getting some greenery back, and really making it a place that is, again, not designed around the private vehicle. And it's not just about taking carriage space away and putting cycling infrastructure or widening the pavements. It's also bringing back biodiversity and making sure that we are tackling the climate crisis in as many ways as possible as we start to change what our cities are moving towards in the future. And finally, this is Waverley Bridge. As you come out of the station, this used to be what would greet you, buses and taxis and traffic. And it's a street that is actually beautiful, and as part of what we're seeing some temporary changes that local authorities are bringing in as they work towards making them permanent if the data and evidence points to success. And you can see as you come out of the station, I was walking down here the other day and I saw this older couple cross quite, slowly. They could cross the street. They stopped in the middle of the street, took a picture of the castle and walked on. And I thought that's what our city should be like, where people can take their time and enjoy their surroundings and not have the constant switch of being worried about what will happen if they step onto their road. I'd like to end on a reflection of where we find ourselves now. As I said last year, it was only a year ago when Edinburgh's plans were signed off and work had started to begin on phase 2. But the world has changed completely and our entire context has changed. We're talking to each other through a screen. I connect to my family back home in India. The picture there is us, as a family cooking together, family and friends. Some of the most busiest streets in Edinburgh were absolutely eerie and ghost-like. During lockdown, I have 2 kids, 7 and 10, and during the height of lockdown, the conversations began with, after the virus is over, what's going to happen? And is going back to normal, does that mean can I still cycle on the roads like I can do now? And for me, that's the thing, looking at the uncertain future ahead, we have to acknowledge that so many parts of the normal that we longed for were broken. And now we have an opportunity to take a proactive approach in shaping the evolving life after what happens as we come out of the pandemic, and eventually ensuring that it can be fairer and a healthier and a happier world. Good urbanism celebrates the crossovers between the quality of our places, our public health, economy, transport, education, air quality, social justice. And if anything COVID-19 has highlighted is the need for collective, proactive, community-based approach to address these crossovers and ensure that people in place are at the heart of shaping a new world. And let's do it together. And I look forward to taking your questions, and thank you so much for listening. I think you're mute, Graham. Sorry. I can't hear you, Graham. I'm really sorry.
Hi, Graham. You need to switch your microphone on. Graham, can you switch your mic on, please? Hi, Graham. Can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. Graham, anything? Okay. Neil, are you available just now to go into your presentation?
Hi, Andy. Sorry, I thought you'd switched me off, but I realised there was buttons at the bottom that I could activate. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm happy to go. No problem. Hello. Well, I hope everybody can hear me.
I can hear you, Neil.
Am I good to go, Andy?
You're good to go.
Okay. Thanks very much, Andy. Well, first of all, I'd just like to say hello to everyone. Thanks to Chris Morris from Local Energy Scotland, who kindly put us forward for this presentation. And thanks to Andy and the team for inviting myself and Warmworks to provide this talk to you today. So I'm going to focus on green energy and green jobs. I'm going to give you a perspective from my role as communities manager within Warmworks, as well as my community voluntary role with the Lithgow Community Development Trust. The three things that I want to focus on are, first and foremost, young people. Young people at the core of this new green jobs revolution that is hopefully going to be the way out of the COVID crisis, and also tackling the climate emergency. So I'll give you a national, local picture of that. And then I want to round off with some general points about citizenship, community and togetherness. And it's probably quite a good follow on from Daisy's presentation, which I thought was marvellous. I loved those pictures and looking at what the future could look like. First of all, just a wee bit of background about our company. We're Warmworks Scotland. We are the national managing agent for the Scottish Government's Warmer Homes Scotland Fund. This is a flagship scheme that's helping people who are either in fuel poverty or at risk of fuel poverty. It's a joint venture between three equal partners: the Energy Saving Trust, Changeworks and Everwarm. Hopefully you all know who those companies are. Between them, they've probably got over 100 years of experience in energy and sustainable development initiatives, installations, etc. Through our work, since 2015, we've managed to support about 5,000 homes every year, about 20,000 so far. And we're saving those households who are vulnerable to high heating bills around about £300 a year. We're very proud of our track record. So far, we have achieved very high customer satisfaction rates and other key performance indicators. Over 3/4 of our customers actually respond to those surveys. You don't always get that in every scheme. And so we're delighted that, we've achieved very well in the scheme to date. One of the key things about this Scottish Government programme is that we want to ensure that we create as many local employment and training opportunities as possible. Our first ever installation was actually in Stornoway in the Western Isles, so we're making sure that we cover the whole of the country. We have 22 local installers, mainly small businesses, some of them family-based, working across the land, and that's a real key feature of the scheme. At any one time, we've probably got between 400 and 500 people working in the scheme. We've brought through over 130 apprentices, whether that's new or whether that's existing apprentices transferred into the scheme. We've enjoyed quite a few work placements, graduate apprenticeships, and couple of thousand, over 2,500 training units as well, which is a range of training such as health and safety, renewables, customer service, trade, industry related training, and so on and so forth. We also try and support our customers who have additional needs within their home, whether they need to do additional adaptation work. Graham, do you mind switching off your sound, please, because it's interfering? Thank you. The measures. Maybe your video as well, Graham. Okay, that's better. Thank you. And that will help with any extra work we have to do. And last but not least, we are also delivering other projects beyond Warmer Homes Scotland as we expand the business. So we have a number of projects throughout the country on insulation, renewables, and so on and so forth. We are a values-based company, and we're very proud of what we do and what we put into the industry. So that's enough about the team just now. Moving on, I'm going to focus first of all on young people. Here you can see a picture of our young Dylan Coyle, who came through Bernardo's Works, getting his SVQ from Diane at RTL Training. So Dylan's now a part of our customer service team. He came in for a work placement and is now in full-time permanent employment with us. And it's very important that we appreciate the range of jobs that we have in our sector. It's not just fitting insulation or heating systems. It's the whole spectrum of staff that support our industry: backroom staff, customer service, inspection, surveying, contract management, health and safety, quality, and it's really important that young people understand the breadth of employment opportunities and training that's available to them. So supporting the future talent is really vital. We have built on the Scottish Government's Year of Young People Scotland 2018 with many employment and training opportunities. We did some additional targets for that year, and about 70 young people enjoyed new opportunities just because of the the endeavours of ourselves and our supply chain. It then led to us actually achieving Investors in Young People in 2018. We're very, very proud of that, and we went on to achieve Platinum Award in Investors in People too. Another example of a young man that's come through thanks to support from Skills Development Scotland's Adopt an Apprentice scheme is young George. George was made redundant, unfortunately, from a railway contractor, and then we brought him into the family. He's now with our inspections team, and thankfully now he can complete his apprenticeship in electrical installation at Perth College, and he will be getting hands-on experience with our supply chain, with BRB Electrical and Everwarm, and one of his key sort of focuses will be air source heat pumps. You know, very important that the youngsters are getting training in the new technologies that are going to reduce the carbon emissions. Here's another example, young Nathan from McInnes. Nathan is care experienced. He's been through the looked after system and came in through Bernardo's Works again, similar to Dylan, and did so well that the company offered him a modern apprenticeship to become a fully fledged heating engineer. And again, young Nathan will be focusing very much on heating and renewable installations, heat pumps, solar thermal, etc. So, you know, very excited for these young people. Hopefully it's creating a real career for them, a sustainable career. So absolutely, young people very much at the heart of the green COVID recovery, tackling climate change, the climate emergency. But there is a massive task before us. We need, in the UK, according to the evidence base, over 400,000 jobs in the retrofit industry to install something like 27 million measures in our homes to get them up to the standards of, you know, either carbon net zero or, you know, high efficiency A, B standards. In the engineering sector, if you talk to the Energy Skills Partnership, Engineering UK, you know, we've known about this for a long time. In Scotland, you're looking at, you know, right now we need 5,000 qualified engineers across the range of disciplines. So it's a huge task that we have in recruiting and training young people and people from the oil and gas sector, people who are being made redundant, unfortunately, because of COVID. There is an explosion of activity, it's safe to say. There are so many initiatives happening at the moment, both in the public and the private sector. A huge amount of money is being mobilised across the globe to try and invest in the green economy. And it's actually, ironically, a very good time for many in the renewables and energy efficiency sectors. But we need to, you know, ramp up the effort. In doing that, we want to make sure that, you know, it's sustainable, that we're building us through local economies, local jobs provision and supply chains. Very important that, you know, we're meeting, you know, today's standards with the living wage. We are a living wage employer, and all our suppliers have to comply with that too. It's not just about young people, it's about senior apprentices as well, green skills for life and retraining people. Skills Development Scotland have a suite now of apprenticeships which they fund, and that includes the modern apprenticeship that I've mentioned before, graduate apprenticeships, foundation apprenticeships for S5 and above, and then the Adopt an Apprentice scheme. We've also been working in partnership with the likes of Developing Young Workforce, who are doing a marvellous job around the country, basically the interface between schools, colleges and industry, and trying to embed some of the work that we do into the curriculum, and creating other opportunities, of course, as well. There are other initiatives out there that you can have a look at. The UK government have just launched recently the Kickstart scheme, which is for 16 to 24-year-olds for 6-month work placements, and they will pay the wages for those, and then hopefully those young people go into longer term opportunities. The Scottish Government is working on another scheme for an 18-month placement called the Young Person's Guarantee, and more detail will be coming out soon. So we're hoping as an employer that we can tap into a lot of these initiatives. In terms of upskilling and retraining, we mentioned that, you know, sort of senior apprentices, if you like. The Transition Training Fund is also there to support employers. We're waiting again for detail of that, and that was primarily set up to support people coming out of the oil and gas industry, and we hope it will be extended across other sectors. There are other support schemes out there, like the Certificate of Work Readiness, which comes through colleges and local authorities, again supported by Skill Development Scotland. Job Start, which is you know, we sort of hand up for people who are maybe struggling to you know, pay for equipment or PPE or whatever they need to start their job. So Warmer Homes Scotland is still at the core for our business. It's the mainstay, but we obviously have those other opportunities. At the same time, the scheme will be getting expanded. We got some extra investment this year to address the growing concern on fuel poverty and poverty per se, and more jobs will be coming through the core scheme as well as those other projects. Retrofit standards such as PAS 2035 will be very important to this, as well as renewable energy. So there's going to be lots of opportunities there in terms of upskilling, raising standards, making sure that we put the right insulation on the right properties and do the very best job. And all of that will mean more community benefits, more jobs and employment opportunities for people. So that's really a kind of very broad brush of some of the opportunities in terms of the green jobs industry. I want to finish off by sort of maybe talking more broadly about citizenship, community and togetherness. And again, this probably links nicely to Daisy's presentation, where she was looking at the urban realm and cities and city centres, and we're kind of focusing more on housing. And one of the things that struck me recently from Dr. Catherine Trebek, who's part of the Wellbeing Economy Alliance, was her statement here about needing new ways of working that were unimaginable 9 months ago, and holding on to those good new practices. I think that's so vital in terms of getting us through the COVID recovery. There was an increasing economic disparity actually before COVID, and the economy was very reliant on low-paid key workers, and that was obviously highlighted through the lockdown. Unfortunately, COVID has heightened inequality and inequity, and it's quite indiscriminate. I mean, if you talk to your friends and families and colleagues, and it just doesn't seem to have any sort of specific pattern, and there are winners and losers. And I think we do need to come together and work together, build those relationships in a meaningful way that is supporting each other. There are many anchor organisations around Scotland that are doing a tremendous amount of work. The Development Trust Association has about 230 members now, and our company has also linked with some of those, for example in Orkney, with the likes of fore, which is a social enterprise helping people out of fuel poverty. Now we're moving on to the local trusts and the council, who we're working with on an insulation scheme. So I think it's very important that private sector comes together with community and public sector. It's not, siloed, and we must work together. Also, we're being boosted by the fact that community benefits are becoming an increasing part of public contracts. Core within the contracts, not as an added tick on. And you can see some great examples in the likes of Perth, where they have actual, lists devised already for where you can invest in community benefits. In terms of corporate social responsibility, I think it's safe to say that this is also on the rise. More and more companies are allowing their staff to, volunteer. We also support the Trussell Trust. It's a charity of choice. For 2 years in a row, the staff have voted unanimously in favour of the trust, and we're doing a number of initiatives, fundraising, fun activities, things that will keep our staff engaged and live up to our values. In terms of myself, I'm also quite passionate about energy and sustainability and environmental issues, having been a big fan of David Attenborough since I was a wee boy. And that has kind of led to many things over the years. And one of them now is my involvement as a trustee for Linlithgow Community Development Trust. I love the idea of the 20-minute town that Daisy was talking about. We're involved in a lot of different initiatives. We're now working more closely with Transition on Lithgow. We have a young energy enterprise group. We've got a social enterprise on solar energy, solar PV, on a number of community sports buildings, and we're looking to develop more. We love the idea of our town becoming a climate action town. We recognise that, well, maybe 3 in 5 people in Scotland actually live in small towns and villages. They don't live in cities. So we need to have demonstrators in the smaller urban and semi-rural areas and rural areas that can show how to become sustainable and carbon neutral or net zero by 2045. Another thing that we do, again back to the young people, is MCR Pathways, which is a fantastic initiative to support young people who are maybe struggling at school, maybe been through the looked after system and just need somebody else in their life to support them. So Warmworks have signed up to this, and I've mentored a few youngsters, as has my MD. And I think it's really important that we perhaps exercise some of our free time and personal responsibility to do that for the younger generation. Just a few general points at the end there. This could be a whole other debate, of course, in terms of the gift economy, social enterprise in Scotland, donut economics, and what I mentioned before in terms of the wellbeing economy. I think all these things are fantastic initiatives that are coming forward more and more, especially because of COVID. And we welcome that, and we welcome the opportunity to join the dots with everyone. Last but not least, I just thought I would end with a wee quote from Rob Hopkins, who is the founder of the Transition Movement, which is a movement to try and wean communities off of the fossil fuels that we have all enjoyed for so many years and now need to move away from. And his book, From What Is to What If, is a fantastic read, very inspirational, as was his first book, The Power of Just Doing Stuff. And I think it's about unleashing your imagination, like the images you saw from Daisy before, trying to imagine what the future would look like and how good it could be for ourselves, our families, our friends, our neighbours. So that's really all from me. There's some more information here, including my details and where you can sign up to our community's newsletter, which is a free quarterly newsletter, just giving you some anecdotes and case studies on some of the work that we do, including some of the young people. Thank you very much indeed. Back to Andy.
Thanks for that, Neil. Greatly appreciated. Graham, are you able to get?
I'm trying. Video doesn't seem to be up yet.
Okay, let me try and pick your presentation up.
Okay. You could put your presentation up, please. Yes, I think I might be able to move the slides as well.
Perfect.
I'll just do a test on the first one. Sorry about earlier problems. I have no idea what was happening, everybody.
Okay, that's you.
Yeah, I'll be able to move them. Thank you.
Okay, thanks, Graham.
Okay, well, I've just got a few slides here, about 15 or 16 that Peter prepared, everybody. So I'll try to get through these as best as possible and catch up by about 11 o'clock before it's Jill's turn to speak. I think what both Daisy and Neil have emphasised this morning is pretty much core to the theme of today, which is about community and a local perspective on what's been happening. And I'm going to talk a little bit about placemaking and how we have helped at PASS to get people involved at that level. So let's kick off. PASS is a charity, a Scottish incorporated charity, stands for Planning Aid Scotland. I've been around for the last 25 years or so. Volunteer-led, we've got about 400 volunteers. We remain impartial and independent. And the reason I say that is that we also provide an advice service on planning matters. So we sit in that space between a local authority that has to grant permission or refuse permission for development and consultants who will pay for advice. So in the past 3 years or so, we've given, in the last year I should say, we've given about 3 years worth of time, skills and experience from the volunteers that help us out working with communities, schools, community councils and on our online advice service. As I say, that's how we help. We provide advice, but we also provide skills training on the planning system. So I've been around the country, Ayrshire, Fife, and various other places, upskilling people about how the planning system works. A lot of people find it difficult to understand or to access. We try to help on that. We're inclusive, so we help out with the decision-making process. We involve young people a lot as well, and Neil, of course, referred to how important young people are for the future, and other seldom-heard groups such as Gypsy Travellers. I'm going to be talking a fair bit this morning about local place plans, which is a new component of the 29 Planning Act. So we're trying to work with communities to articulate their vision about their place, to develop local place plans. In some respects, people say this is nothing new. There's a crossover between core town planning and community planning, but it's a new vehicle, if you like, for expressing local opinion, and I'll tell you a little bit about that as we go forward. As it happens, I live in Leith, and we've been doing some work locally to try to bring the ideas for a local place plan together, but what's not helped us is the capacity of volunteers to do that. Okay, now participating in planning and placemaking is not a new thing. If we go back to 1969, the Skeffington report said that planning was very distant and it had to get people involved in a more creative way. And ever since then, we've been trying to ensure that people are involved in decision-making processes in a more creative and transparent way. The Christie Commission then in 2011 said that reforms must aim to empower individuals and communities. Some people might argue that an empowerment is something that can be taken away, but I think, in fact, in truth, the involvement of individuals and communities has grown really exponentially. And then it gets to a point of, have we got consultation fatigue? Is there capacity out there to keep involved? And there are a number of ways of planning that is being articulated, and there have been some amendments to the way it's done during COVID, because people can't go to presentations by developers in the local village hall because physical contact is not on the cards just now. So a lot of that is being done virtually, and there have been some relaxations in planning about the extent of duration of planning permission and so on, to allow deliveries to supermarkets, for example, or to ensure that enforcement is done in a way which is fair to business as well as to locals. Like I say, this isn't a new thing that goes back to the days of Patrick Geddes, father of town planning, who said planning's all very well, but it has to involve place, it has to involve people, and that's what we do. You can see some pictures on the right there about some work we've done outdoors in schools with the place Stanford, which some of you will know about. I'll say a little bit about that. This slide simply shows the fact that we use the Place Standard, which is also an app for your devices, to talk about 14 themes about your place. So it doesn't necessarily apply at the street level, but it can be very useful to get people's ideas about part of a town, the whole city. Not so effective at the regional level, but we can talk about economy, jobs, litter, dog fouling, that always comes up, transport, what people think about housing, and so on. And it creates a spider diagram because it's based on a score of 1 to 7 for each theme. And then we get an idea about what the priorities might be that could be addressed. One of the things that, we go back to Skeffington and the Christie Commission, the barriers to being participants in planning were way high, a brick wall. But these have been gradually brought down. And this slide simply shows you that if you think you're treating people equally with a box to stand on to see the match, well, it's okay for the tall kid, but not so good for the one who's small. So we have to remove this systemic barrier, and that's something that's done over the years in planning, particularly on major developments, for example, where there's a statutory responsibility for the developer to hold exhibition to get people's ideas about their development before the application is submitted. Margaret, could I ask you to put off your sound and vision? Things in place through the pandemic, it is a planning issue, as I've said, because some amendments have been made to the system during the pandemic in order to keep development happening, in order to allow people to continue to participate And there's been a big impact on well-being. You heard Daisy's presentation about spaces for people, for example, creating more space on the pavement. How people are being asked to cut their hedges back because the pavement's not even as wide as it should be. So we need to get a better feeling, a new feeling about what people's experiences of place are during COVID, so that we come out of it a better way. We need more social connection than ever before, because we've been physically distanced. Even the planning minister said recently that while he was holed up in his flat in Edinburgh attending Parliament, it had no balcony, he had no access to outdoors, and he was so glad to get back to Aberdeen when he could, in order to enjoy the garden and outdoor space. And that's a design matter for new development in the future. Do we create that outdoor space with balconies and terraces as more or less a right rather than an option? Now, the Planning Scotland Act 2019 brought in some new opportunities. I just want to explain something very briefly. The National Planning Framework will be part of the development plan next time round. It wasn't in the past, and that might seem like a rather precious comment to make, but the point is that the development plan is the top of the list when it comes to determining the planning application. The Act also introduced purpose for planning. There's a lot of debate about whether that was sensible, because if it didn't have a purpose, what was the point? But anyway, it's on the face of the Act now, and the purpose is to manage use and development of land in the long-term public interest. I mentioned local place plans. These have been introduced as a new community-driven element of planning. They won't be part of the development plan. The development plan will only comprise the NPF at the top there, and the local development plan, which is put together by the 32 local authorities across Scotland, and in the case of the national parks as well. But local place plans don't just cover development. They cover all sorts of things: the social, isolation and health we should be dealing with, the economic, training and jobs, for example. We'll refer to that as a very important part of community localism. And environment, rivers and green space. So the LPP, local place plan, has the opportunity to bring a different perspective on development and the long term, and to ensure that local developments have regard to what these local place plans express. The Act also brings in some new duties about involving travellers, new guidance on community participation and self-build, which has been anxious to help to articulate. It's probably best if we leave that one for delegates to consume at a later stage, just some of the expressions of what a local place plan is intended to do as set out in the Act. A lot of the guidance and support and the relationships between local authorities and emerging local place plans are still to be developed or to emerge. So these discussions have yet to take place. There's an opportunity for communities, also for landowners and housing providers to work together in more creative, co-produce, if you like. There is a question about capacity, and I was going to refer to that at the end today. We do need a community body to prepare the local place plan. The Act defines what a community should be. It could be a community council, it doesn't have to be. Co-production will be very important. We need to involve different groups, youngsters, people with disabilities, past and work disability members. The planning authority must have regard to the local place plan, register of them, and it will be reviewed after 7 years. But it's very early days. I'm going to show you just a couple of examples which touch on what a local place plan is expected to express. doesn't have to be 100 pages long. The Applecross Community Land Use Plan there on the right is just a couple of pages. It's focused very much on social housing, because in Applecross, in the northwest of Scotland, very popular tourist area, a lot of second homes, and that just doesn't help with the people. Supporting community-led housing is something Petra is quite keen to develop. I'm going to suggest that we leave most of the housing stuff to Margaret Fraser later on in today's presentation. But the idea here is about co-development, community-led, which I'm thinking we'll be saying a fair bit about, and some innovations in housing delivery. I have to say that some of the housing association development, quality, appearance, and design-wise, is much, much better than some of the volume house building we see across particularly the outskirts of our town cities. So, that would be a great theme to develop. This map used to be colour-coded, but it's not. Red isn't bad, blue isn't good, but it's just to indicate that co-housing simply hasn't got off the ground in comparison to other parts of Europe. For example, in Sweden, where it represents about 18% of the total stock. So there's a long way to go to develop that community-based idea around housing. How can PASS help? Well, as I said at the beginning, we provide free, impartial, confidential advice on planning matters. Contact us through the web or on the phone. We provide information and support. We hope to do much more about that in the future on local place plans. We've also provided, you see on the right there, an advice sheet about what these could be. We'll provide training for community councils and groups, schools, also elected members. I've done a Skype with a council member in Shetland, for example. Things online these days. But we also provide our time and knowledge and expertise through our network of specialist volunteers, many of whom are town planners, but have also got other skills to bring to the table to deliver a service to communities across Scotland. So there's a quick whiz through. I think we're back on time at just before 11 o'clock. So I'll be able to hand over to the next speaker, Andy, who will be Jill. Thank you very much.
Hi, Jill. Can you come in, please?
So while we wait for that, Jill will be our next speaker. Jill is a public health programme manager at the Glasgow Centre for Population and Health, which is tasked with informing and supporting action to improve health and tackle inequality. I strongly recommend that you have a look at the Centre's website, which is gcph.co.uk, which covers a wealth of topics. Jill's presentation is towards the City Food Plan for Glasgow. So over to you, Jill.
Thank you. And can everybody hear me okay? Is that working okay? Yep. That's great. Thanks, Graham, for turning off your speaker there, and thanks for having me this morning. I'm delighted to have this opportunity to talk to you all about the City Food Plan and about the consultation that's just gone live. I'm going to take about 20 minutes or so of your time. Over that period, I want to give you a little bit of background to the Glasgow City Food Plan, how it's developed, what we hope to achieve with the food plan, and to give you a bit of detail about the actions proposed in the current public consultation. I can't go into all here, so I'd encourage you to read the consultation document that I've got a link to at the end of my presentation. As Graham said, I'm a public health programme manager at the Glasgow Centre for Population Health, although I'm currently spending quite a lot of my time working on the pandemic as part of the public health team at Greater Glasgow and Clyde. So it's quite a nice break from that to come back and talk about this again today. I've been working on food from a public health perspective for quite a number of years, but I'm speaking today on behalf of our multi-agency Glasgow City Food Plan project team. That has included colleagues from the City Council, from Glasgow City Health and Social Care Partnership, from the Community Food Network in Glasgow, and the Health Board. and also our Glasgow Food Policy Partnership, which is a multi-agency partnership group that has membership from a wide range of partners across the public, private and third sectors in Glasgow. In my presentation, I'm going to cover a range of things, but firstly, I want to talk about our reason for developing a food plan. Now, for many of you, you will understand this, so I apologise if I'm going over old ground, but our food system it's complex, it's interconnected. There are many challenges and issues that Glasgow and the wider country, but Glasgow in particular, face on a daily basis and have faced for a number of years. Some of the data that describes this are shown in this infographic. Many of these issues, in fact all of them, are interconnected. We have high levels of poverty, and that means that we have high levels of food poverty, because poverty is the main determinant of food poverty. We also have growing inequalities in obesity and other diet-related conditions, primarily influenced by people's socioeconomic conditions. Our poor diets in Glasgow and in Scotland as a whole contribute to this, and much of that poor food that we're eating also contributes to damages to our environment. A healthier diet is not only better for us, it's also often more environmentally sustainable too. Also, purchasing more locally produced food can help keep money in our local economy, which means that more people have jobs, which is good for addressing poverty, which is the determinant of health. And incidentally, buying locally produced food can often be better for the environment because it minimises the amount of transport, the amount of air freighting, etc. that is involved. And just for interest, the food system that we have in our world at the moment contributes around 30% to our global carbon emissions. And that is not coming down at the moment, unlike some of the other contributors to our carbon emissions. To date, we've often addressed these issues separately with different policies and strategies. But we believe, and the approach that we've taken in Glasgow aligns to this belief, that by addressing these together as part of a coordinated approach will make a bigger difference. And that's what our food plan is seeking to do. So when we talk about improving food systems, the term good food gets bandied about quite a lot. And I'm not a big fan of jargon, but we've used this term frequently throughout our food plan. And by good food, what we're meaning is food that's accessible, affordable, healthy and tasty, good for the planet, and good for those who work in the food industry. So it's food that is good for society, it's good for health, it's good for the environment, and it's good for our local economy. It helps build up a more resilient city in all terms of that word. And we believe that everybody has a right to good food. So our food system should in essence be, it should reflect our shared equity, health and sustainability goals. It should support the social and economic recovery of our city, particularly at the moment, and it should enable everyone to eat good food. And this is what the Glasgow City Food Plan aspires to. So here I've described, or I've set out our long-term vision in the City Food Plan. That is that we work towards achieving a fair and resilient and environmentally sustainable food system that enables everyone in Glasgow to eat healthy, affordable and culturally appropriate good food, irrespective of where they live, irrespective of their income and irrespective of their personal circumstances. The food plan has not appeared out of nowhere. It's developed over a long period of time. It's been a very iterative approach over many years. Lots of people and lots of organisations have been involved. On this slide, I've summarised the key milestones on that journey. I'm not going to read through this each one at a time, but you can read it. But there have been multiple meetings, events, seminars, tireless work in and across communities to address the different challenges posed by our food system. Increasingly, people have recognised that these are interconnected and that we need to try and join up our approach. But that has been challenging, but we have been making progress towards that. The process of developing the food plan since around 2014-15 has been overseen by the Glasgow Food Policy Partnership, working with our public sector and with our partners across the private and third sector. Glasgow's Food Policy Partnership is the city's multi-agency group that is part of the UK-wide Sustainable Food Places Partnership, the Sustainable Food Places Network. And we've been working together to try and join up what we are each doing to improve the food system. The Food Policy Partnership was established in 2014, and one of the early things that we did there was work with Scottish Government and community food organisations across the city to support the establishment of the Glasgow Community Food Network, which was established in 2016, which is a massive asset to our city and provides a voice for our really valuable community food projects in the city. You can read the other milestones here. I won't go through them all, but I just want to highlight that in developing the food plan that is now out for public consultation, we worked with many people across organisations and across communities in the city. We used evidence and expertise from colleagues within the city, from across Scotland and internationally, to help inform the city food plan. And we also spent the summertime trying to incorporate the key learning that we gathered during the first wave of the COVID pandemic, when some of the weaknesses and the lack of resilience in our food system became very obvious indeed. We've tried to develop a plan that is transformative, that is achievable and addresses the main issues facing the city. But I don't for a second think we've got it all right, which is why we're going out to public consultation and why we're trying to speak to as many people as we can during that public consultation to get their views. We're engaging with stakeholders across the city. We're engaging with communities of interest, identity and place in a range of different ways. Clearly, our plans to go out widely have been challenged by the current requirement to focus on digital approaches and the limitations of the COVID restrictions, but we're still trying to have as proactive an engagement as possible during the consultation. So at this point, I think it's probably helpful for me to begin to describe a little bit about what's in the food plan that is out for consultation. So we have a number of long-term outcomes. These are listed on the slide here. You'll see that there are quite a few of these. There's 9 of these. But you also hopefully will see that many of these are supportive of each other. So by having them all together, we hope that each one, which is interconnected to most, if not all of the others, will support the achievement of the other. And what we're hoping to do is have a food plan after the consultation, an agreed food plan that has a range of short and long-term actions that will together help us on the road towards these long-term outcomes. So the plan is organised into these 6 themes. These are somewhat arbitrary, as I've said. We recognise the interconnectedness of all of these. So these all interconnect. But in order to write the food plan and in order to have some kind of a format to it, we have picked these 6 themes, which are broadly in line with the themes of Sustainable Food Places approach to sustainable food. A working group comprising a range of people from across organisations and communities in the city with expertise in each particular theme. A working group was developed to develop each of these themes, and the outcome of those working groups is what has made up this food plan that is going out for consultation. So what I'm going to do is give you just a few examples of the short-term actions that have been proposed for each of those themes. I've summarised about 4 or 5 short-term actions for each theme. There are more of these and more detail in the actual food plan, but for the purposes of today and the limited time we've got, I've just picked 4 or 5 that I think are examples of the sort of thing that we are trying to achieve. So firstly, the food poverty theme, what we're calling Fair Food for All. This theme summarises what we know about food inequality in Glasgow. It proposes short and longer term actions which seek to reduce the levels of food poverty and food insecurity in the city. In the short term, the actions that we are proposing include to develop a better understanding of the nature and scale of food insecurity in Glasgow, to develop a more coordinated approach to responding to those experiencing food poverty, which would include preventing crises and meeting needs more immediately for those in crisis, and that would include income maximisation and welfare rights, as well as providing food. In terms of community food, the plan recognises the massively important contribution that our community food sector makes to our city and has made for many years in terms of supporting communities across the city through food work. This has been particularly obvious over the last 6 months when the community food sector has really come into its own in supporting communities facing really challenging times as the pandemic took its toll. In this theme, we're proposing actions to build a more resilient and sustainable community food sector that builds on the strengths of the food sector and enables it to achieve even more. So proposed short-term actions here include establishing a food information hub for community groups, reviewing and improving community food training, recognising the importance of involving community groups in planning and designing food ventures within their communities, and piloting a single sign-up point for food skills courses across the city. In terms of food catering and food procurement and catering, this theme recognises that our city's spend on food by our public sector organisations and beyond can be used to support local food producers, and we can do more on that. It can also be used to increase demand for more sustainably produced food and to provide healthier options on a wider scale. So the actions proposed here are to offer more Scottish, seasonal and local food in public sector catering, to achieve the Healthy Living Award for all council venues, to achieve the Bronze Food for Life served here accreditation for our school meals, and to encourage more people in Glasgow to follow catering careers so that as our food economy develops, more local people are able to take advantage of that. That's obviously linked to our food economy theme. And in this theme, we're highlighting the important role that Glasgow's food economy plays as a food provider and as an employer, and also the contribution it can make to increasing the provision of local sustainably produced food and making healthier options more available across the city. In this theme, we think there is a really important role for the food economy in Glasgow to help build more career opportunities within Glasgow and to encourage and support wider adoption of circular economy principles as part of food production and provision. And all of that would contribute greatly to developing a more sustainable food system in the city. In terms of our environment and food waste theme, this theme recognises the need to address the food system's current impact on the environment, and this comes from its contribution to global carbon emissions, but also to air and water pollution, and also to the current loss of diversity that is really challenging our future food supply chain. We also want to try and reduce the amount of food that goes to waste, because clearly all the energy that goes into food production is completely wasted if that food then is not eaten. And then once it is disposed of, it can often contribute even more to our carbon emissions as it decomposes. So in this theme, we're proposing action to reduce food waste in public sector services, to improve and increase the redistribution of surplus food. And this happens to some extent at the moment, but we think we could build a lot more on the good work that is already happening, for example, in Fair Share. To improving education about the links between our food choices and our environment. Often people think about the food choices in terms of health, but the food choices that we make also have an impact on the environmental impact of our food system. Importantly, in this theme, we're also recognising the need to move towards sustainable food production and reduce the contribution that our food system makes to climate change. And that's a longer term goal, but there are some small steps that we can be taking that we've outlined in our proposed short-term actions that can help us make more progress on this. Lastly, but absolutely not least, is the children and young people theme. And in this, we're highlighting the role that good nutrition throughout childhood makes to young people's development. There's a need to enable all children and young people to eat good food, and we also need to build better knowledge and more skills in all aspects of good food for our children and young people in and out with the education setting. So the actions proposed here relate to developing a more collaborative approach to implementing Scotland's Diet and Healthy Weight Delivery Plan. At the moment, I think that health is leading on that, but there's a real opportunity to engage all our partners in Glasgow in that delivery and connecting and coordinating better the work that we're doing. We want to establish good food groups in all schools. We've got some of these in the city that are working really well to build food across the curriculum, and we think we can build on the good work that's already happened. We want to continue our efforts to try and limit the clustering of fast food outlets around the school. This is a thorny issue that's been around for a number of years, and we still need to try and take better action on that. And that can potentially link to some of the planning work that's been talked about earlier this morning. And we also want to maximise uptake of the Children's Healthy Weight services to try and support those young people who need more focused support in managing their diet. So the importance of food, I think, and I suggest to you, for health, for equity, for the environment, and for our economy, and for our city's resilience, has never been greater. The COVID pandemic has highlighted this starkly, I think, in some of our communities. We have a real opportunity here, I believe, with this food plan. Partners across the city have made a commitment to this, and we have had commitment that this will be owned by and report to the community planning partnership. So not one single body or one single organisation is responsible. All of the community planning partners are responsible for delivering on this, which I think is a massive opportunity for our city. So it's going to be the Public Health Oversight Committee that the food plan delivery will report to, and that then reports in turn to the community planning partnership. This food plan I propose will bring a more coordinated approach to addressing food issues and challenges in Glasgow, and it will join up action on a range of strategies, plans and targets so that we can really capitalise on some of the synergies rather than potentially have the problems of duplicating, coordinating or lack of coordination of some of the work that's happened up to now. So we want to make sure that the final plan reflects the needs of the city and that it's widespread support and buy-in. We feel that that's absolutely essential to maximising the implementation of the plan when it comes into force later in 2021. And in order to maximise the buy-in to the food plan, we're undertaking this public consultation, but we're also undertaking a period of quite proactive engagement as part of that consultation. So I'm keen for you all to help publicise this consultation to your networks and let them know about our consultation. And I would also welcome your thoughts about what the food plan should include in order to improve Glasgow's food system. I'm sure you all have a wealth of ideas about what the current challenges are and what we can do to help improve it. The consultation and engagement period runs between now and the end of the year. The formal consultation is on the Glasgow City Council consultation platform, and the link is on the screen now. As I say, we also are undertaking a number of proactive engagement events, which are at our Sustainable Food Cities Partnership website, which is goodfoodforall.co.uk. As I say, we're having to be a little bit imaginative in how we do this, and as far as possible, we're also hoping or planning to go out and speak to people through our networks rather than expect them to engage with us, which in some communities and for some stakeholders is quite a challenge. So we have a range of different engagement events that we are undertaking. In January and February, we'll be reviewing all our consultation responses, and then we will produce the final Glasgow City Food Plan around March 2021. And after we have taken that to the range of different committees that we need to take it to in order to ensure we have buy-in and in order to agree our implementation plan, we plan to launch the final Glasgow City Food Plan towards the end of April 2021. So hopefully it will be in place in time for COP26, and it will be part of Glasgow City, what Glasgow City can showcase when we appear on the international stage for COP26, showcasing what we're doing to address sustainability and reduce climate change in Glasgow. So I'd really welcome your thoughts on what you think would help make a better food system in Glasgow. As I say, you can go to the full consultation on the Glasgow City Council website or at goodfoodforall.co.uk, or you can let us know your ideas on social media using the hashtag that's on the screen just now. I also welcome questions when we get to the Q&A this morning, or any thoughts or ideas. And you're also welcome to email me. I'm at Glasgow Centre for Population Health. You can just Google that and find me on there, and I would welcome any thoughts. But thank you very much for listening.
Thank you very much, Jill. And yes, I certainly hope we'll have some questions later on, not just for you, but for Neil, and probably for me too. We'll move on swiftly now to try to knit together some of those themes in a case study supporting the local economy, community, businesses and the supply chain during COVID with Margaret Fraser. Margaret is Regeneration Manager at NG Homes, NG being North Glasgow. NG Homes is a community-controlled housing association, and happily, like many housing associations or registered social landlords, as you can call them, NG focuses on place and people, not just bricks and mortar. So over to you, Margaret. Margaret, you need to unmute. Margaret, you'll need to unmute.
Hello.
Yeah, you're good to go. Margaret, you'll need to unmute and then you're good to go.
Can you hear me now? Hello?
Yes, that's good.
Yeah.
Yes, that's good.
Sorry, can I just say, I don't know what's happened, but that's the wrong PowerPoint that's showing. Hello?
Yeah, we'll need to get Andy to fix that for you.
Yeah, okay,
Andy.
so that's the wrong PowerPoint. So supporting the local economy, community businesses and supply chain through COVID.
Yes, I realise that. I don't know why that's happening.
Yeah. So maybe we could just take that off and I can just talk.
Yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, okay. So I'll follow mine here if that's all right. So apologies for that. I've had a lot of problems with connections this morning. So if you just bear with me. Okay. So I was asked to talk today about support the local economy, community businesses, supply chain through COVID, and just really tell our story here. So first of all, problems here. So first of all, I'll tell you a bit about NG Homes and who we are for those who don't know. We are the largest community-based housing association in Glasgow. We cover something like 7,000 properties. That is over the Springburn, Postle Park, Ballonic and Park House area. And our vision is a community where people can flourish and prosper. We see ourselves as a community anchor organisation. We have a social enterprise who carry out estate management, etc. And we have an established community regeneration department within our area. Can I just check, can people hear me all right? Hello, can people hear me all right there yet?
Yes, I can hear you.
Right, okay, thank you. Okay, so we've also got high levels of community engagement, capacity building, and we've got strong cross-sectoral partnerships. So obviously the COVID crisis really came to us at speed, and already we started to look at how we could respond to that. So first of all, we started to look at what could the impacts be in this for our community. And I'm sorry I can't share the PowerPoint with you because I had some some details on that were maybe easier for people to see. So in terms of, we also obviously realised it'd be a food crisis. We could tell that there would be a sense of loneliness, anxiety increased. We were aware that we would soon see the closure of schools, heading into a lockdown. We then came across the shielding of vulnerable individuals, self-isolation, and in top of that we could see that there was a reporting of health and mental health issues, and also very much the fear of the unknown. So we felt that by using our existing resources and strong partnerships that we could mobilise very quickly to support people through this crisis. So first of all, looking at our strong networks and access to venues, organising and facilitating community hubs to organise localised support, bringing that kind of collective support to identify and work with those who are most vulnerable, utilise our current systems and processes that we already had and build on the strength of partnerships, whilst at the same time maintaining the guidelines that we all have to meet in terms of GDPR and Scottish Government guidelines. And also, given the enormity of this, was also to identify partnership funding to support what we wanted to do. So just to give you an idea, of what we had going on to start with, we already had been delivering for some number of years a furniture and food distribution service within the heart of the community, and we operated that through referrals both from our housing, education, health services, etc., to support those who were most vulnerable. We also had with that 2 dedicated officers and vehicles to help to support that. So that was both food and furniture to people who were most in need. Very much in terms of using a kind of circular economy approach with our furniture like gathering in donated items and then giving those out to people who were maybe presented as homeless or in hardship. So we already had that in place, although the funding was ready to come to an end with that. We have high levels of community engagement across our partners with the community. So again, we had access to high numbers of individuals, and also through our housing staff, we were able to immediately contact those who were in the category of older or vulnerable to start making a difference. One of the key areas as well that's important we're looking at the response was that we also hosted the Business Improvement District for Postle Park, and that's through funding from Scotland's Towns Partnerships. So given all of that, we held a meeting. We could see this kind of coming our way, as we know, kind of January, February. We normally held community networking breakfast meetings every month in the area, which would host about 70 odd people. So we held a community networking breakfast on the 13th of March, and that was that included members of the community, voluntary organisations, public organisations, and basically from that we started to kind of highlight what we felt was going to be the issues and how we could each respond and work to each other's strengths to do that. So, for example, some of the areas we covered was the food supply support, the distribution, the need for hot food going to older and vulnerable people, because given the fact that people could not leave their homes, and also the impact of social distancing and isolation and shielding on anxiety and loneliness, so the need for welfare calls, for example, and all the other things that people may need, to be able to, that normally they could just do every day. So it might even be something like going to get prescriptions or walking the dog, things like that. So all these things that could really kind of, that people would say, well, now what can I do? So we then came up with possible solutions, and we decided that one of the areas we'd do was to set up community hubs in the various areas, and we would look to maintain a food distribution, a food supply to those. So very much we started communicating with tenants, working together as a group, so with elected members, with partner organisations, with other housing associations to come together to do that and look at the immediate needs that we had to do. So again, as people will remember from that time, when lockdown started, there was a big surge on supermarkets to get food, and there was queues, there was all the rest of it. And that also was the same for some of the community food hubs. So we had to look at a different way of working. So what we did is we set up a supply chain. We worked with some of our partners who had previously owned restaurants and other establishments like that, to ask who their supply chains were and how we could link into that. So we started to look at that to get the food brought into the community, and then our guys could then distribute it through the community hubs. So that was a kind of area. We also connected up with Glasgow Fruit Market to arrange for fruit and veg supplies to come in so that we could distribute that. But one of the areas that we looked at is, obviously we were all affected by the crisis, and so also were our local businesses. And we can see that in terms of the economic impacts for those, it was really huge, and some of them were threatened with closures, etc. So we took an approach that we would work very much with our local traders. So we started that off with the Apostle Park Business Improvement District, and we worked very closely with the local butcher, with the grocery store. We also worked with a large manufacturing company there who provided additional funds to help to support some of the basic items that people didn't have, as we realised when we were providing food, like cooking facilities, microwaves, cookers even. So we started working with the local traders. And the difference that really made was that people were getting nourishing food, rather than having to rely on tinned food and other items like that. So that was a kind of that was a decision that we made. We also looked at the hot food, and we were delivering hot food daily to people within the community. And for that, we worked with 2 local social enterprises, and that was Progress Partick Thistle Trust and Possibilities. And we also provided the food for them also to be able to cook that and provide that to people. We got other support from hotels, leisure groups as well, and we received funding from both Scottish Government and National Lottery to be able to roll this out to the wider community. Over a period of 27 weeks, we delivered a total of 6,217 food parcels and delivered 11,825 hot meals. Another area that was, coming up was we worked very closely with cultural groups within the area, strong partnerships with African Challenge Scotland and Glasgow Afghan United, and we were acutely aware of the need to provide culturally appropriate food. So again, we worked with those groups, and we worked with local businesses to identify sources for halal and African produce, and we have been doing that throughout the COVID response. We also provided, as part of another wellbeing programme, we provided some hot food as special treats as people were kind of coming out of lockdown, just to help support that. So basically, we felt that as a community, it was important to connect with all members. So that's both the traders, the community themselves, the organisations, because we were all feeling the effects of this, and the best impacts for people would be if we all worked together. So very much the benefits to this was we supported local businesses. Now we also worked with local cafes, we worked with restaurants, but as I say, also to purchase food from local businesses. It was a more responsive service. For example, we've often had the situation where we have received a referral, maybe at the weekend, we could then contact the business and they would then deliver to the individuals. So nourishing good quality food, identified local businesses for appropriate food, supported social enterprises, encouraged a collaborative approach, and obviously supporting the ongoing work to shop local, and that's something that's been very keen. Within the presentation, I did have a number of images showing the benefits of that with local traders, both in Apostle Park and in Springburn. And also, as part of that, we are now working with Scotland's Towns partnerships, both in Springburn and Postle Park, and we're setting up an app and a local directory of foods and other organisations to help to support people within that. I'm just going to go back onto that. So just in terms of other areas, that we're working on. So as a result of this, we're now looking at, we've got allotment spaces, which we're continuing to work on. We're kind of taking that a stage further. We've been talking to people around collective purchasing, around mobile services, around ideas with pantries. And we've also been supporting the Baby Food Bank there to help to work with families in need. So again, we're looking at accessible ways, accessibility, affordability, nutritious food to come into the area, but more than that, a large partnership approach. So that's kind of all there. So I think just in terms of the future, just encourage sectors to work together, make the local economy and partners stronger. We see obviously a change as well in terms of digital inclusion. We're planning also for inclusive growth, looking at local environment, employment initiatives, very much around the local area, taking into account our learning from the COVID-19 crisis. So I'm going to leave it there. It was a wee bit difficult without having the presentation in front of me, but I hope you were able to take some of that in. Thank you.
Sorry, I missed that. Could you say it again, please?
Hello. So I'm just going to finish there. I think it's a wee bit difficult without the application, the presentation here, but I hope you've got that.
Yeah, thanks, Margaret. I think Andy's going to make sure that your slides are available.
Yeah.
Along with everybody else's.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. Well, that's been great stuff. That's the 5 presentations done. We're bang on time for a question and answer session, and we have invited delegates to put their questions up, but I'm not seeing any on the board unless anybody thinks differently. So what I was going to suggest, since we've got trouble with bandwidth, is that Neil and Jill and myself and Margaret go on to audio only, and we can go round the panel and trade some further ideas and maybe a couple of questions. I know I've got a couple, but I don't want to kick off. So if we go on to audio only, and we'll take it maybe starting with Jill, if you'd like to make any comments or ask a question.
Thanks, Bill. I've got a couple of questions. Firstly, I guess for yourself, Graham,
Sure.
what opportunities do you think there are in planning to improve the local food environment where people live? What we often find is that people find it increasingly hard if they don't have a car, or if they live in some communities, to access food, because there is an increasing move towards fewer local shops and more large shops that are distance away, and also the shops that are local tend to be fast food of relatively poor nutritional quality. So what opportunities might there be in planning going forward to change that? And for Margaret, I'd be really interested to know from you what at a city level would help support the fantastic work you've been doing locally. So what, in terms of thinking about the work that I'm doing for a city food plan, what is it that have been the particular challenges that you've faced in doing what you're doing that might have been easier by having something, some gateway open or some particular support from the city?
Okay. So, who wants to go first?
Do you want to go, Margaret? I think Graham's not there.
All right, yes, I'll go. So yeah, interesting enough, that's one of the areas that we've kind of come across, because I think what the pandemic has shown is that it's how to get people to the shops and how to get food to people. even within the area where we work. So one of the things I admitted to mention was that one of the areas that we've got funding for is for a local shopper service, and that shopper service will be able to take people to the local shops, because we are trying to get people to shop locally. But the other thing as well is to take food to them. So one of the areas that I'm particularly looking to develop is a wee bit like a mobile service, similar to what we used to do many, many years ago with the green grocers van and things like that coming into the area. And I think in some ways that may be the way to go. Some of the barriers to that may be, in terms of, people being able to pay with cash. So we're looking at, could we have a kind of local card or something? It's just because that was one of the things that we came across initially when people were shielded. Some of the older people were saying, we can pay for this, but we just can't. We weren't allowed to take money, and obviously the service we're providing, wasn't for that. But if we are looking forward into the future, if people can't get out of their homes easily, if they can't get something, so how do we make it easier for people to shop within their actual local area without going to a shop that is charging aggressive prices? So again, it goes back to the whole kind of collective purchasing idea, but maybe have localised hubs, and maybe a wee bit like the pantry situation, Jill, there. So
thanks, Margaret. That's really helpful.
That's a big question you raised, Jill. Some of it, I've got some planning answers for you. In Edinburgh, for example, where new development takes place, there's a requirement to put retail floor space at ground level. So I do see that in some places in Edinburgh. But I think that's fine where new development takes place. But most of us live in places that don't change very much over time. So I'm thinking about how do we plan better accessibility to food. If you live in a peripheral state and you've only got access to the chippy and the bus fare is £2 or £3 return, well, you're not going to find that terribly easy if you're on a low income. And that's not just a planning question, that relates to transport policy as well, but ultimately to the way we design places. I wanted to turn one of these points back to you and ask if in your consultation on food, you've had any thoughts about how all the vacant and derelict land in Glasgow could be used to help to grow food locally. And actually, I'd like to pass that question on to Neil as well in relation to energy production or energy crop, if you like, on vacant and derelict land. So maybe over to you, Jill, first of all.
Sorry, there's a wee bit of background noise. In answer to your question, there's a lot of thinking going on about vacant and derelict land. There we go. That's a bit better. There's a lot of thinking going on about vacant and derelict land, and I know that our community food network in the city are looking to develop plans for more urban food production in various forms. So some of that would be community led, and some of it would be market gardens, in order to supply more food for local business. And local social enterprises. So there are plans, clearly they require funding, and what we're looking to do is try and firstly get multi-agency support for these types of things, and then ideally start to develop multi-agency proposals for funding. Clearly funding is much more successful when you've got multi-agency support for that. So it is a slow process, but there are certainly plans and aspirations around all of that. The other challenge is, of course, that the soil in the city is often contaminated, so there are issues around what can be grown and where, and that requires a bit of thinking, and may require raised beds or other solutions. There's also quite innovative thinking around vertical farming and how we can use not just vacant derelict lands, but vacant derelict properties to grow in those. So there is certainly quite a lot of dialogue going on around this and how we can best use the assets that we have going forward to try and increase the amount of food that's produced very locally in the city.
That's a good point about contamination. the huge amount of vacant and derelict land, particularly derelict land, is contaminated with chemicals or metals and so on. That's a very good point. I'll come back to you with another question later on, but maybe Neil, you've got a thought on vacant and derelict land and energy?
Yes, I was inspired about a year ago when I came across Iceland, who have these community greenhouses. So they're using geothermal energy to heat these large industrial greenhouses, and then they're kind of using them as like internal allotment sites, so communities can actually buy or lease the plot within this huge greenhouse, which is powered by heat from geothermal. A number of years ago in the Lithgow, an architect had an idea to use perhaps one of the fields adjacent to our housing developments for permaculture, and using ground source heat to heat the greenhouses 24/7, and then produce local food produce and niche produce all year round. And then, of course, Cala Homes came along and were given planning permission to develop great big houses on it, which nobody can afford apart from perhaps more affluent. Oh, they did there housing, which is good to see, but it was prime agricultural land, and there's still a lot of housing in town. So, I think I would like to see counties working more closely with and through communities to develop renewables and food production. We have a really good farmerly group in Lithgow as well. Chap who's got narrow boat farms, and we're in an allotment as well at Phillipston, and there's a number of allotment sites. But I think it needs very careful community engagement, consultation to look at how you could combine the two. And I'd like to see a lot more innovation, with heated greenhouses, solar greenhouses, and use of ground source heat as well. I think there's a lot we could do, and we need to look at other countries like Iceland, etc., that are doing this. The transition movement as well has a long history of permaculture, and you can see that growing, as Jill was saying, in Glasgow with all the community allotment sites. But yes, you can certainly convert a lot of this land, subject to obviously contamination, over to food production, and I think we can marry the two together very nicely to tackle food poverty, fuel poverty, and sustainability.
Yeah, thank you, Neil. And it reminds me about the fact that some work was done a while back on heat mapping across Scotland, and that can give planners and others access to information about sources of renewable heat, which might help to develop some of those greenhouse ideas we've got. Maybe we could turn to Margaret and see if she's got a question for any of the other panelists.
Hello. Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead, Margaret, if you've got a question.
Right. Well, sorry. Could you say that again? I just didn't hear that there. I think it was some background noise.
Yes, it's just to invite you to ask a question, either of myself or Jill or Neil.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think Jill, I mean, the work that you're doing there is absolutely fantastic, and I've been involved at various stages. It's something that's come up right across the community where we are, and I think there's a real movement in people that, local people who really want to make a difference. Some years ago, we carried out a consultation, and it was called Feeding Our Community. And we got that a pictorial version of that as well, and people really did react to that in a way. And a lot of what's coming out of the food plan certainly takes cognizance of that. I think there is a real move to encourage healthy food, even within the Glasgow Holiday Fund, for example. Where we have to be able to demonstrate that we are providing healthy food to people. I think from a community point of view, we would be very keen to work closer with yourselves within that plan, and we would leave ourselves open as a community for you to come in and chat to various members. I'm thinking particularly some of the community hubs that have have been formed as a result of the COVID, and also with the Baby Food Bank, who also have particular ideas, and those who participate in our family breakfast clubs. So it's an area I think they would really want to get involved in, if that was something that you would want to come and chat to us about.
Yeah, absolutely. We'd be delighted to do that. Whatever format we can manage to do that, then yeah, absolutely. We can touch base offline, but we're very happy to speak to yourselves and anybody else that feels that they have ideas and suggestions based in their experiences and their work that would help shape the food plan. Yeah, no, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, I've got a couple of questions from delegates now. And the first one is from Judy Wilkinson. She's asking, is procurement for pantries a problem? And just before we go to the answer on that one, we've got another question, which was for Jill from Helen Chambers, about the school standards that you mentioned, which was bronze. Why that couldn't be a higher aspiration. So maybe the first question on pantries, and then the second one for Jill on the bronze standard.
I'm happy to take both of them if you like. Other people may be able to offer more in the pantries. The pantries are developing. There are various approaches to pantries, and other people might know more about their own particular pantry. But as I understand it, the food that is coming into pantry is largely surplus food, for example, from FareShare, and also that is supplemented with other locally sourced food from various different sources. So in that respect, I think it's different from, for example, other local food retailers. They won't always have the same selection of food. So whether that's a problem or whether that's an opportunity, I'm not quite sure. I mean, ideally, I've spoken to some areas that are looking to link the pantry with other community food-based work, potentially around a community food hub, where there are also opportunities to cook together in a community kitchen using that local food, which would ideally potentially be quite seasonal, and also possibly linking it with a growing space where they can grow local food to supplement what's available in the pantry. So I think there are a range of different approaches to pantries and how they source their food. And I think it's really what we would like to see is local communities developing the approach that is best for them, depending on what other local sources of food that there might be. There might actually be other retailers and in the local area, and the pantry needs to focus on a specific part of it, for example, fruit and veg. So I think that from our perspective, I think a local approach to pantries is ideal, and maximises the potential for the pantry to meet the local community's needs. With regard to the schools and the Bronze Award, the Bronze Award is a challenge from where we are right now, which is why the Bronze Award is where we want to get to. There are also quite a variation in terms of what is offered across the city. We also have quite a long period of time where we've had a few area-based cooking kitchens, and then peripheral cook or sort of the serving kitchens where they just have the facilities to heat the food up that's been cooked in the cook kitchens. So we need to think about how do we bring the whole of the school food service to the same level, and we're working closely with the catering service to do that. So the bronze is a challenge, particularly a challenge in the current economic climate, but that's where we want to get to. But that's not to say that is the totality of our aspiration. We do want to go much further, and we also want to adopt a whole school approach as well. We don't just want to focus on the catering. The catering side of things within schools, it's really, really important that across the curriculum, the same messages and the same information and the same opportunities are given to all children and young people about learning about the food system as a whole, understanding how to make informed food choices when they become independent young people, and not just relying on the catering service to provide them with healthy food when they're in the school environment. So yes, the Bronze Award might seem not particularly ambitious. It's important for us to get there now, but our aspirations do go much beyond that.
Thank you, Jill. We've got a couple of comments in the chat facility about pantries. One's from Fiona McGovern, who says that a pantry receives the majority of its food from fair share and has established other relationships with food suppliers and supermarkets. I just wanted to relay that to other delegates. Judy Wilkinson say that's great, that she understood that funding for pantries from the council was a problem for local suppliers because of procurement rules. So just put that out there as well. Okay, we've got, I hope we have a new question. I'm not seeing it. Ah, yes, here we are. Here's a question from Joy Chercoy. She's asking, are the development of community composting schemes on the cards for food waste food? So maybe that's again for you, Jill.
Thanks. The Community Food Network have had a number, well, I know that they've had 2 bids in for community composting facilities, specifically for community food organisations to use, but they've not been successful in that funding. They have got other funding bids in, for example, with the Climate Action Fund, and we've been supporting them with those bids. So there are aspirations there. Clearly, the city has put a lot of investment into taking food waste out of the standard refuse process and having a specific food waste facility. And so the City Council are keen to maximise that. So there are aspirations for community food composting. Absolutely, there are opportunities for maximising what the council has put in place as well, and those are all part of our conversations. However, one of the things that has come up repeatedly is that we are keen and we recognise the importance, and we want to keep the focus on the need to reduce surplus food in the first instance, or rather reduce food waste in the first instance. There will be a proportion of food waste that's unavoidable, but at the moment we have quite a lot of food waste that should be avoidable. And we work closely with Zero Waste Scotland as well. And the key message has to be about the food waste hierarchy and the need to try and avoid food waste in the first instance. But where we can't avoid it, yeah, absolutely, we need to be working towards composting facilities.
Thank you, Jill. It's good to hear that you're working with WS on that aspect of the circular economy. While we wait for some further questions from delegates, I was wondering if I could ask Margaret also about the circular economy point she made about furniture within the housing association stock that you manage. Do you find that charities locally are, shall we say, a bit miffed about competing for goods, or are they respectful of your approach?
No, I think we work with all other organisations, and we started this through funding from the Climate Challenge Fund, and because we were looking to marry up the need and also the amount that was going into landfill. So it also forms part of a zero waste implementation plan that we started about 8 years ago. We worked with Zero Waste Scotland, Glasgow City Council on that. So this was one of the areas that we wanted to focus on. So we rescue furniture from households, from void properties, good quality furniture. We've also had furniture from hotel groups. Now we also include furnishings, and that also includes textiles as well, where we operate a swap shop. Some of those have had to be carried out differently during the pandemic, but what we clearly see is there's still an absolute need there. We are now reletting properties again. We are seeing people coming as homeless, who basically have nothing other than the keys to their home. So that is very powerful. The other thing is it is also helping to support the amount that is being dumped in the area, because on the other hand, for people who are maybe donating items, then if we will take good quality items, that's fair enough. So we don't just operate with our tenants, so we operate wider afield there. We don't have enough resources to give out at the moment. And part of that is because the unit that we also work from is at capacity. So there is a definite need out there, to do that further. Another area I would just point to is one of the lessons that we learned through the COVID crisis when we were giving out, emergency parcels. We were often coming across people who didn't have proper cooking facilities, such as just cookers and, microwaves, things like that, or also couldn't afford to cook. So that's been something that we've kind of taken on, looking at funding to help to support people as well, with these items. So it's quite a big, it's a big picture. We want to do more around the circular economy. And I think when you're talking about food waste as well, that's an area that is of concern to us. So that's an area that we're actually discussing just now with our local traders, and we're looking at pilot areas to identify some of those issues. I think it's all interlinked, within the community. So, but that was a methodology in it, is to, obviously for the Climate Challenge Fund, we're able to demonstrate the carbon savings, but the actual social need as well is an area that's, that was also very, very important to us. And I think the fact that people don't want to be throwing things out, so they're looking for, a way to then redistribute that back into the community.
Thank you, Margaret. That's very helpful. Still, I don't see any further questions from delegates. A couple of comments, nevertheless. But I wanted to ask Jill and Neil about COP26 next year, which of course the UK government is hosting in Glasgow. The story goes that there'll be a ring of steel around the Scottish Events Centre, where internationally all the delegates will be gathering. But locally, there'll be lots of side meetings. I wondered if anybody had been developing ideas locally based that they would want to feature at COP26 and how they might go about that. So maybe Neil and Jill.
Do you want me to go first? I mean, we've not, as far as I know, I mean, I've not had any discussions about COP26 with either my work or my local trust as yet. But I think it would be good to, showcase some of the good examples that are going on. I mean, we are moving more and more to installing heat pumps in people's homes as part of Warmer Homes Scotland. That has increased the electrification of heat. We have a project that's supported by BES. We have a battery storage project in the Fleece of Galloway. And we have an underfloor installation heat pump project in the Borders, and we recently won an installation project for Orkney Council. So I think it'd be good to kind of show what's going on in housing and some of the improvements. Of course, all the social landlords are doing some magnificent work and have done for many years, including North Glasgow Homes, of course. In terms of the trust, I mean, as I was saying before, one of the ambitions that we have is to see if we can push our small town to net zero earlier than the government's target by creating a demonstrator town. So it'd be probably quite good to see other examples. I mean, one of the examples that was cited by the Renewable Energy Cooperatives Network, which is an EU-funded project which has now become a network across Europe of about 1,200, 1,500 energy co-ops. And one of the best examples that was cited was Güssing in Austria, who had a fossil fuel-based economy. It was a small town like Lithgow with a brain drain, lots of youngsters leaving, high unemployment, and they basically transformed the whole town by going for energy efficiency, reducing energy consumption, renewable energy, biomass, solar, etc. And they've transformed the town, and they now are a net exporter of energy. So I think it'd be really good if, you know, the government and others can come together and showcase some of these brilliant examples. We need more positive examples and imaginative ideas to show, particularly the younger generation who, you know, might be sitting there thinking, you know, what does the future hold for me? Well, look what we can do if we put our minds to it. So I'd like to see as many examples as possible, you know, community-based, grassroots, as well as, you know, what the private and public sectors are doing.
Thanks very much, Neil. Any thoughts, Jill?
So from my perspective, there are a number of things going on, and I think there will be more things emerging over the next year. I know that the Community Food Network and a kind of civil society groups across Glasgow are working on a range of profile raising events and campaigns in the run up to COP26. So others will probably be more up to speed on that than I am, but I think there's some fantastic ideas coming out of that. In terms of specific bits of work or specific development, I know there's been a lot of work amongst between my colleagues and the Scottish Exhibition campus, the events campus, to on their food and on their food procurement and their catering service, and they have been working really hard to develop a food procurement and catering service that reflects the aspirations. So they've increased the amount of local food sourcing that they do, and they have reduced the meat and increased the sustainability of the food that they are serving. So what we were really keen was that the event campus themselves walks the talk in terms of what we're trying to achieve as a city and as a global community. The other thing that we are looking to be involved in is in November launch an international network of cities that will work together to share those innovative ideas that Neil talked about towards to reduce our collective contribution to climate change and reduce our carbon emissions. So Glasgow has committed to signing up to this, and there are, I think, well over 100 cities currently signing up to, and that will incorporate primarily food and be focused primarily on an integrated food policy within each of these cities that is focused on reducing carbon emissions as well as equity, improving equity and reducing health. So we're hoping to use COP26 as a kind of motivating stage for influencing better action and better connections towards reducing our carbon emissions. But the other thing we're hoping to do is engage the media in increasing local people's knowledge and awareness of what they can do to reduce their own carbon emissions, and also to try and support local businesses to capitalise on what is likely to be an opportunity for them. They're going to have many, many people visiting the city over that period of time looking for what they believe to be low carbon options in food, in transport, in all sorts of things. And it's a real opportunity for our local businesses and our local providers to develop their kind of low carbon offers to take advantage of that. So there's a range of opportunities and a range of things happening, and there's much more in development, I think.
Could I also thank you, Jill? We plug for Home Energy Scotland, which wasn't on my slides, but they refer people into the Warmer Home Scotland scheme and also provide free and partial energy advice across the country. Been going for many years, and you can get free and partial energy advice. I think, you know, having a presence from them as well as Local Energy Scotland and Community Energy Scotland and all the great and the good from our sector to showcase this, and as Jill was saying, you know, what can individuals do? Well, you know, there's a whole array of support and advice that they can tap into free of charge, you know, which is funded by the public purse. And, you know, I would like to think that a lot of that work will be showcased as well at COP26. I don't think that England, for example, has the same kind of homogenous approach as we have. The home energy networks are just not there down south, and may not actually be in place in other countries. So I think people will learn from Scotland. On the food side, absolutely, with a lot of the wonderful stuff that's going on there, and also on the energy front.
I think you're dead right, Neil. Scotland has got a lot to offer, and a lot of knowledge transfer to offer other parts of the planet. Just before I go around the panel again for final remarks and make some closing remarks myself, we've got one more question, which is probably for you, Jill, and it's from Joan Murphy, and she's asking, does the food train operate in Glasgow? It provides a shopping and delivery service to older people. Very briefly, Jill.
Very briefly, yes, it does in some parts of the city, but I think it's fair to say it could probably be built on. But yeah, it does exist in some bits of the city.
Thank you for that. Okay, just go around the panel once more to make any final remarks before I close off today's conference. You wouldn't believe we had crisis-proof our community hearing about all the good work that's going on. So, Margaret, first of all, have you got anything you want to add before we close down?
Yeah, well, I think one of the main areas for us is we've learned so much through the crisis, both as a community and as organisations, partners, and I think we've all had to learn new ways of working. One of the, I think about 90% of my time is now taken up with this, so moving away from areas that I previously worked on. And I think the whole thing around the food supply chain has actually been huge. I have learned a lot in terms of that, and also, around the need as well to be mindful of the culture appropriate food and the difference that really makes to people. Also the difference of, nutritious food, get that accessible, get that to people. We've had numerous comments just on the difference that's made, but also one of the big things that's come across to us is just the gratefulness of people saying, that just the kind of kindliness that's been shown within communities, and that people all working together for, this within this one area. I think it's something that won't be forgotten, and something that we should all recognise and build on in the relationships that we continue to form in the future as we see ourselves moving out of the crisis into the next level.
Thank you, Margaret. I'll turn to Neil now, but there is just embedded within what I might ask you to say one further question, which is, would you be happy to advise a small town up in Murrayshire on how to move forward on their initial plans for renewables and fuel poverty?
Yes, I'd be delighted to. In fact, we've been approached by a few local communities recently to get that advice, and we've done exactly the same in the Lithgow, of course. For example, with Calendar, I think there was a coordinator on from Calendar I see on the people's list. If I can just quickly find her. We've been up there to speak to the likes of Frank, who was instrumental in setting up the Hydro scheme. So yeah, we've learned from others, and we would love to pass on our knowledge, whether it's from a work point of view or community voluntary perspective. Absolutely, no problem.
Great, thanks, Neil. Anything else to add, or shall I pass to Jill?
I'm sorry, with Helen Terry, coordinator at Calendar.
Okay, over to you, Jill.
I've got not much to say, and I know that the noise, the background noise is a bit difficult, but in essence, I think the crisis, the last 6 months, 9 months, whatever, which is going to go on, I think has emphasised or re-emphasised, if we needed it, the importance of communities and the important role communities play in meeting their own needs, but the important role that the public sector needs to play in enabling that to happen and supporting that. And whether you're talking about food or other things, communities know what they need, and the role of the public sector should be to support them to identify that and to support a delivery on that. And I think in the food plan, what we're trying to do is build on the great work that communities do, and that was exemplified in the pandemic crisis of spring and summer. We are looking for the food plan to enable communities more to build on their strengths, to build on what they're doing well. So rather than come in with a plan that tells them what to do, we're looking for them to tell us what they need from a city food plan to support what they want for the future. And I would hope that this paves the way for other kind of cross-sectional city-level policies in the future that try and open those doors, build on the good work that's already happening, and support a collective and collaborative progress forward, rather than coming in with a more directive plan, which I think is sometimes what we've seen in the past.
I think you're dead right, Jill. It's the difference between bottom-up and top-down to use those broad terms. It really does make a difference, and it's really important to sharp focus in the situation we're faced with now during COVID. Well, to keep the time, everybody, I'm just going to make a few closing remarks about today's webinar. Once again, I think we've shown that there are a huge range of organisations out there doing sterling work to improve our daily lives, whether that be our life chances, where we live, how we feed and care for ourselves. Video on. So we're indebted to the expertise of the people we've heard today, Neil, Margaret, and Jill. And I think it's notable that the topics our speakers have covered, myself included, all play into what I see as contributions to a just transition away from a comparatively high-cost, carbon-intensive, unhealthy past, all bad, some of the topics of the day, where we design better, more efficient places, and focus on health and well-being as well. Local self-sufficiency really is one of the cornerstones of making progress towards living within our means. I read we already used up one planet's worth of annual resources by the 2nd of August, which was dubbed Earth Overshoot. And that can't continue. We can also see local having a bonus effect through asset transfer, community-owned land, better green infrastructure, but these are all other webinars. However, there's one point I'd also like to make, which is that local initiative is pinned heavily on voluntary effort, charitable support, and individual and collective enthusiasm. There are nagging questions about community capacity, sourcing, and things not within local government control, like land ownership, VAT, or energy policy. But as you've heard, evidence-based investment in better choices we can control are making a difference. So it's been really refreshing to hear from Jill and Margaret today about the work they're involved in. I hope today has reinforced for you the power of local, where so much of the action is taking place. This event will be recorded for future consumption, so if you want to catch up on it. So thank you to all our speakers and to Andy Crayley at Impact Energy for today's webinar. Thank you, good afternoon, and stay safe.